Hey, so today, let me just tell you where we're going as a church here for the next several weeks or so. Today we're finishing up this series called Shhh, or Shush, maybe, right? Depending on how you look at it. After this weekend, you know, we are only 4 weeks away from Easter. And so we're going to, after this series, we're going to launch into a series called Intersections at the Cross. We're going to look at some snapshots building up to Easter. Okay? Easter, to me, is the Super Bowl of Christianity. Okay? Like, Christmas would be like the NCAA basketball tournament, or maybe World Cup soccer, maybe, but definitely Easter is the Super Bowl, in my opinion. And so, love to have you continue to come and to engage in things that were going on in Jesus' life in about the last week or so of his life on earth. So, how is Shhh going? You guys, okay, it's pretty quiet. It must be going well. You guys are just shushing yourselves. Pretty tough topics, some of them, right? Gossip, taming the tongue, and today we've got a kind of a tough topic as well. Here's the reality, and here's why I think this series has been so important, and I think today's message especially is so important. Here's the reality. As human beings, we hurt each other, don't we? It's just part of our nature. It's part of being fallen. Even if you're a Christian, it's said that you are sinning less, but you're not sinless, right? We oftentimes I think part of being in relationship, that the part of that word relationship means that we have to keep redoing things because we hurt each other. We clash with each other. We crash into each other. We have conflicting ideas, and sometimes we are flat out mean to each other, aren't we? Like, I know, was it last week or the week before, a lot of you guys raised your hands to say, you know what, I've been sinned against. I've been gossiped against. People have talked bad about me. I mean, there's tons of different ways that we hurt each other, even within the church, isn't it? We can gossip. We slander. Sometimes we lie to each other, and sometimes we lie about each other. A lot of times people in the church do business together, and guess what? Not all of those business deals go well. Sometimes people clash over that and go their separate ways. The church, there's tons of people that leave any particular church any year because they got hurt, because they feel like that they were sinned against by somebody in that church. Promises get broken between believers. Get this, affairs and adultery are probably as common within the church, unfortunately, as they are outside of the church. I'm embarrassed for us all in that. And it hurts even worse. Any of these sins that happen against us hurt even worse within the church context, doesn't it? Because these are our brothers and these are our sisters. One of the people that have done the most in my life is a guy that lives in Chicago. His wife had an affair with his pastor. That's a big ouch, for sure. Abuse. There's abuse that goes on between brothers and sisters and believers. There's physical abuse. There's emotional abuse. At times there's even spiritual abuse where people will use the Bible and spiritual things to abuse and to manipulate and to twist other people. Just look at me. Don't look around right now. Hands up if you've ever been hurt by somebody in the church. Vast majority. In fact, I'm not sure I saw anybody with a hand down. There's one of my favorite pastors always says this, or has said this maybe once only, I guess, actually. He says, church would be phenomenal. It would be awesome. It would be incredible. It would be utopia if it wasn't for the people. He quoted himself today, actually. That's the thing, though, as people, don't we? We just clash at times. We hurt each other. We sin against each other. Here's the reality, though. Here's the good news in all this. Jesus gives us a plan on how we can handle it. It's not even so much a matter of if, but like when it happens to you. How can you handle it? But here's the reality. His plan, I'm not going to lie to you guys, is difficult. It is as hard as eating vegetables. Do you guys like to eat vegetables? I like 7 vegetables, okay? The first on the list is potatoes. and corn and rice. Those are my 3 favorite vegetables. Are there any more? I don't know. I hate vegetables. I take multivitamins and stuff like that, and I know Jules is not happy with me. But I don't like vegetables very well. So to me, what Jesus is telling us, and get ready to turn to Matthew 18, verse 15. What he's telling us, for me, is like eating vegetables. In fact, it's like eating the most difficult vegetable that I can imagine, cauliflower. Who likes cauliflower? Okay, if you, be honest now. You guys liked cauliflower or didn't like cauliflower? Okay, well,
cheese on it.
Cheese on it. Absolutely. What? All kinds of stuff. Put it on there. Ketchup, cheese, whatever. Where's my pictures? So to me, what Jesus is telling us, how to deal with conflict, is so hard. It's like the choice between cauliflower for me and cupcakes. Okay? Who would rather have cauliflower? Come on. Who would rather have cupcakes? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. They're that sweet buttercream. It tastes so good. That moist cake, right? But you eat like 1, maybe 2, sometimes 3 cupcakes. How do you feel afterwards? Ugh. Just bad. Like you just got to lay down and take a nap, and you kind of got the shakes and all that kind of stuff. Where if you eat cauliflower, you get a lot of protein, a lot of vitamin D, and all that other kind of stuff, and it fills you up. So to me, and maybe if this works for you too, doing what Jesus tells us to do when we've been sinned against is a lot like eating cauliflower. I'll eat it if I have to, I guess, right? If that's going to be the best. But I'd rather eat a cupcake. But cupcakes are not good for me. I know that. So in Matthew 18, starting in verse 15, Jesus gives us 4 steps to resolving conflict. 4 things that we can do in order. There's steps in a process if we've been sinned against, if somebody's hurt us. And so Matthew, the first step is this. It's go in private. And that's the first blank in your talk notes there. Go in private. Matthew 18, verse 15. If your brother sins against you, go and show him his fault in what? In private. If he listens to you, you have won your brother over. Jesus, I think, right here in Matthew 18, verse 15, says this. Shh. I know you've been hurt. I know it sucks. It's horrible. It wasn't right. It's sin. But shh. Don't go telling everybody. I know that's going to be like the cupcake for you. I know that's going to be the easiest thing to reach for, but don't do it. Wait. Go in private to the person that's hurt you first. I don't have any official statistics on this. I wish I did, but I believe that if people did step 1 of this process, 95% of all conflict would be resolved. I'm convinced of it. At least 95% of all conflict would be resolved if you would just go to the person that's hurt you, go to the person that's sinned against you before you tell it to anybody else. I also believe that 95% of all conflicts don't start here. They don't try to get resolved here. I believe 95% of us reach for that cupcake. Let me tell my wife. Let me tell my friend. Let me tell somebody else about what Joe did to me. And if your name is Joe in here today, I'm sorry. I'm not. It's just a general term. What Joe did to me. Did you hear what Joe? Did you hear what happened? Anybody play the telephone game when they were a kid? Okay. It's also called the Chinese whisper game, apparently. It was a game invented to help children better communicate with each other. And so if you don't know the telephone game, you get some people in a circle, and one person whispers to the next person in the circle something. And that person whispers it to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, and then you see what comes out at the end. Is it ever the same? You know, I was thinking about doing that here. If I would just start in the first row and go back to the back row or whatever to see, but it would probably take a lot of time. It would probably be disastrous. And I wanted to find a really good YouTube clip, and I couldn't really find one that was good, but I watched an interesting one where there were about 8 people in a circle, okay? And the leader started out, and he said this. He said, small towns have lots of mills. That was his statement. Okay, now if you've been in a small town, there's lots of grain mills, you know, in Kansas and Missouri and places like that. Small towns have lots of mills. It goes around the circle. Okay, what do you think it came out with at the end? All clowns should be shot and killed. That's deadly if you're a clown, right? But the reality is we're all kind of clowns, in a way, too, so we need to be careful. The cupcake is reaching out and just starting to talk about this. It's getting that game of telephone going, and you have no control of what's going to come out at the end of that telephone game. Here's a couple of ideas, a couple of tips on step one about going in private. The first one is this: go. Don't wait on them. Don't wait on Joe to come make amends with you. You know what? The reality is Joe probably doesn't even know that he's hurt you, that he's sinned against you. There's a really good likelihood that he doesn't even know that that has happened. And the whole idea here that Jesus is telling us is keep the circle of anybody who needs to be involved in this conflict as small as possible for as long as possible. And so what better place to start than with Joe? Is anybody here named Joe, by the way? Okay, good. I know you wouldn't probably raise your hand. So go. Don't wait on them. Go to them. And as part of that go, don't use technology. Okay? Don't use email. Definitely don't use texts. Okay? How many people here are really good communicators with texts? I am not one of those. I can't keep a train of thought going on text. I don't know all of the abbreviations. Too much can go wrong with texting, especially around an issue of conflict, can it? Yeah, okay, so you guys have had some stuff go wrong via text before. Go face to face. It's going to minimize any kind of miscommunication or autocorrect. How many people have had a bout with autocorrect that's bit them in the rear a little bit? Yeah. Here's one that I saw online. Now let me read this to you. Here's the text. Your mom and I are going to divorce next month. Apparently this is the son or the daughter. What? Why? Call me, please. I wrote Disney, and this phone changed it. We are going to Disney. Texting. Do not go to Joe via text. Proverbs 25, verse 9 says this: argue your case with your neighbor himself, and do not reveal another's secret. It's just smart. It's just wise. The second tip under this step one of go in private is this: show. Okay? Show. Many times the offender doesn't know how they've offended you or hurt you or sinned against you. And the attitude that you take going into that conversation is going to be key on how that conversation goes. If you go in there, guns a-blazing, how's it going to go? It's not going to go very well. But if you go in there, you're going to get shot. Somebody's going to get shot. But if you go in there with an attitude of, I want to explore what's really happened and how this has gone wrong and get to the bottom of it. And one of the good ways to do that, to not put the person who's hurt or sinned against you on the defensive, is to use I statements, not you statements. You know what I'm talking about? Say about how it made you feel or how you dealt with it, not pointing the finger and saying you. This is basic stuff. I know many of you have heard this before, but I don't think we can hear it too much. Using I statements versus you statements. Let me give you a few, okay? Here's an I statement. I feel hurt about what happened. And the you statement is, you're a jerk. Right? Second one, I'm not sure I understand the truth. Right? You come in there trying to figure out what is the truth. The you statement is, you lied to me, buddy. How about this one? I really value our friendship, but I feel left out. You betrayed is way better than you betrayed me or you ignored me. And lastly, here's one to use. I'm wondering how our relationship is doing. Versus, you've been talking about me? Huh? Because I know you have, right? So just some I statement, using I statements rather than you statements. And here's the thing. I mean, the reality is these are hard. A lot of us go through hard things with each other. If you're the one that's been hurt and offended or sinned against, you're still to respond gently. You're still not to go in guns a-blazing. You did this. You shouldn't do that. You hurt me. Galatians 6, verse 1 says, brothers, if someone is caught in a sin, you who are spiritual should restore him. How? Gently. Gently. At some level, it's just common sense to not put your adversary, the person that hurt you, on their heels and have them backpedal, but to draw them in. So I believe if we do step one, at least 95% of all conflicts between people would probably be resolved. But if that doesn't work, what Jesus says is go on to step two. And step two is to take one or two others with you. Take one or two others. Verse 16. But if he does not listen to you, take one or two more with you, so that by the mouth of two or three witnesses every fact may be confirmed. I think most of us honestly start at step two and we only do half of step two. Okay? I think most of us just tell other people. That's the cupcake. That's the easy. But that's the one that's not going to be good in the end. I believe this verse says this. Take others with, and there's a blank there for you. Take others with, not just talk to others about. Does that make sense? Take others with, not just talk to others about. That second half happens way too often. The all caps there, the mouth of two or three witnesses, that's something that's been since Old Testament times. The reference there is to Deuteronomy 19:15. Back in Old Testament times, no truth was ever established without two or three witnesses. Now the reality is, when we're engaged in conflict with people in our church or brothers and sisters, again, and this is two believers, this whole section, we're probably not going to be able to reenact the scene of the crime and go back there. And so you're probably not going to have two or three witnesses to the offense against you. But what you will have is two or three witnesses that are there with you to help you make amends and get through this thing. Two or three counselors, if you will, to start to speak into this process. And so the one or two people that you choose to go with you, if it goes to that, it's important that they're not just people on your side, not just thugs, that'll beat up whoever you ask them to go beat up, that they're people that you respect for their wisdom, for their intelligence, and for their ability to deal with conflict. And the reality is, I think going to that other person, we also have to be a little bit open to what is God going to do to us, or for us, or in us, in the midst of this process. I know most of you guys are Latin fans. I found this Latin term. Plus videm oculi quam oculus. Many eyes see more than one. Bringing people along, trusted counselors and advisors can help gain better perspective on the situation and may figure your way out of this situation or out of this conflict that you would have never thought of yourself. Proverbs 15:22 says there is wisdom in the abundance of counselors. But only at this point, right? Only after you've already talked to your brother. Okay, so now if step one, I think, would get us to fix 95% of all conflicts, I think if we did step two, actually did it the way Jesus talks about here, I think 99.999% of all conflicts amongst Christians would be solved. What do you guys think? Yeah? I think so. But guess what? Jesus goes one step further. Just in case this isn't working, he says this, step 3, tell it to the church. Yikes. Verse 17, if he refuses to listen after you've been to him with one or two other people, it says tell it to the whole church. So this is where you get to stand up in church, right? And talk to everybody. And we're going to do this, I think, starting on the third Sundays, maybe we'll have airing of the grievances in step 3 in the Matthew 18. Okay. Like I said, I'm not sure I've ever seen it go this far. But here's the reality. Here's what I think Jesus is saying here. First, if the church leaders haven't been involved in this, okay, come to the church leaders at least by this point. Let them in on it. If they need to then make it known to the rest of the church, then it's up to them to do that. But remember this. We've tried to keep this circle as small as possible for as long as possible. They've tried to work the situation out. You've given Joe, the offender, the sinner, plenty of time, plenty of resources, plenty of ideas for how to overcome this and to gain the relationship back. Now by the time the whole church gets to know that the church is making its plea to this person. Please listen. Please know that you're outside of the bounds. Please know this. And I think if it ever gets to that, the thing to remember is this, is make no room for rumors. I think people leave churches probably every week in our country, and it's because of some rumor somewhere. No one really knew why Joe left the church. We just know that he's mad. We're not really sure why. And then the telephone game gets started all over again, and it's probably way, way worse than it ever really was in actuality. And so that's step 3, is tell it to the church. And lastly, if that doesn't work, okay, we've tried, Jesus says, you've tried everything. You've been diligent in this. Here's what he says for step 4. Treat this person as an unbeliever. Treat as an unbeliever. Verse 17b, the last half of verse 17. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall have been bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall have been loosed in heaven. Again I say to you, that if 2 of you agree on earth about anything that they may ask, it shall be done for them by my Father who is in heaven. For where 2 or 3 have gathered together in my name, I am there in their midst. What does it say? If this person won't listen to the entire church, it says to treat them as a Gentile or a tax collector, to treat them as an unbeliever. The good news is you can evangelize them, right? You can bring them in, tell them the good news. This is a big deal, isn't it? A big, stinking deal, not to be taken lightly. But I put those last few verses in there because I think oftentimes you've heard those verses where 2 or 3 are gathered there in his name, whatever 2 or 3 ask for, I will grant, right? The context of that verse is here in Matthew 18, where you're dealing with how to resolve conflict and sin within the church. And the church purity, the church being a community that fixes its problems, that doesn't shy away, that eats cauliflower rather than cupcakes, is very important to Jesus. In fact, he says it's so important that I'm giving you these steps. If you go through these steps and this person still isn't listening to you, then you have my authority. You don't have to back up on that decision. It's right here in the Bible for you to see. Again, I've never seen it go to this. But I think it's important to remember that Jesus wants purity. He wants good community to happen within any of his bodies of believers. So that those verses, about 2 or 3, are not for whatever we want, right? If I could just get a couple buddies together, boom, I can get whatever I want. No, it's all about restoring and bringing pure community back to God's church. As we close out, let's go back, because I know this stuff is heavy, right? Especially these last 2. Pretty heavy stuff. Let's go back to why is Jesus even talking about this in the first place? Going back to Matthew 18, verse 15. If your brother sins against you, go and show him his fault in private. If he listens to you, what? You have what? Won your brother. Won your brother. Gained a brother. Some of your biblical versions probably say the whole goal here is to win this person over, to restore the relationship. And it's interesting if you're in Matthew 18, if you have your Bible with you, to where does Jesus say this in the grand scheme of the sermons and the discussion that he's having at the time? Because where it is in the conversation is the context, and context is always key when we're reading the Bible. And the context here, I think, makes it even more apparent what the main goal of this teaching, of this difficulty, of this cauliflower in Matthew 18 is. Just before this, Jesus tells the story of the lost sheep. There's 100 sheep, right? One of them gets lost. What are you supposed to do? Well, let's just minister to the 99. Our odds are better there, right? No, he says, go out. Get that lost sheep. Go do it. Go find. And the lost sheep it's somebody that's sinning, that's out there, that doesn't know Christ or isn't following Christ rightly. There's a whole idea of bringing this stray back into the fold where it'd be protected, where it'd be provided for. So that's what's coming in the front end of this. And what's coming after Jesus gives us these tough words? This whole idea where Peter says, hey, if I forgive somebody 3 times, is like that enough, Jesus? Jesus says, yeah, 3 times is pretty good, but how many times? 77 times. So Jesus sandwiches this difficult teaching with going to find the lost among us and bringing them back in with forgiveness. You continue to forgive. You let that person know who's outside, who's sinned against you, that forgiveness will always be available to them. And the whole point, the whole goal that Jesus is upholding, not within just this section of Matthew 18, the whole goal, though, is reconciliation. Isn't it? The whole point of Jesus' teaching and many other teachings besides just this is all about reconciliation, if we can do that with each other. Isn't that what our whole belief system is about, though? Reconciliation. That God would do whatever it took on the cross to reconcile us to him. And if you've experienced that, if you've gone through that, if you truly understand the fact that you are a sinner, that you are a brother who has sinned against God, a perfect and holy God, and you've received forgiveness, how much more should we be able to give it and receive it within a community of believers? The reality is, Romans 3, right? We are all sinners. 3:23. We are all sinners. So welcome to the club, right? We're all sinners. We're all going to hurt each other. It's just a reality. But what we do and how we deal with it is the most important thing in a community of believers. Here's what Christian psychologist Larry Crabb says. He says, the difference between spiritual and unspiritual community is not whether conflict exists, but is rather in our attitude towards it and our approach to handling it. When conflict is seen as an opportunity to draw more fully on spiritual resources, we have the makings of spiritual community. Who wants to be in spiritual community here? Let me ask that again. Who wants to be in unspiritual community? Who wants to be in spiritual community here? It's going to take each other to help each other eat cauliflower sometimes, isn't it? For me, I need some help in eating the cauliflower. We don't get stronger eating cupcakes. We get stronger and we get more fulfilled eating cauliflower. The reality is we are going to hurt each other. We were in Mexico. We had a great 10 days in Mexico. And on our last day, we had to check out of the hotel at noon. And about 10:30, we were still playing in the pool. And they had a great kids section. They had 2 water slides. One was long and slow, and one was short and fast. And so for my youngest, Keely, I would get in the water next to where the water slide, dump the people out so that I could catch her and put her back up. She's not that great of a swimmer yet, and having all these people crash into the water was a scary thing for her. It's our last day there. We're an hour and a half from checkout, and Keely decides to go down the fast slide. Well, she was scared, and so she put her feet up on the edges and was barely going down the slide, okay? And she was almost to the end, about 5 or 6 or 7 feet left to the end, and it was taking her forever because she was scared and it was going slow. And I'm in the water next to the slide going, it sure is taking a long time. and I've got this futuristic thing in my mind. I can see what the danger is. I'm looking to the top of the slide. It's not exactly like Health and Rec down in Mexico. They're not paying as close of attention, okay? And sure enough, here comes a lady, a very large lady. Bam! Just smashes into Keely, launches her about 8 feet into the water. I could see it coming, in a way. And just thinking about it, even still, just gets me, you hate to see your kid get crunched and get hurt. And I got her out of the water, and she was crying, and we walked her around and made sure that all of her pieces and parts were functioning, and she was carrying one shoulder down a little bit, but I think she was too afraid to go to the doctor, so we didn't end up going to the doctor. But and she's fine now, okay? And the lady came, and she was so apologetic. She's like, I didn't see, I thought she had gone, and all this stuff. And what could I say at that point, right? Just say, it's okay. I think she's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. In essence, I'm saying, I forgive you for smashing into my beautiful 6-year-old child. And I wanted to say a lot more than that. I really did. But what good was it going to do? I share that story because if you just stand outside the church and look for a while, you'll know that there's a lot of water slide situations that can happen. There's a lot of people moving slower or faster or whatever it is, and there's going to be some collisions. There's going to be some hurt. There's going to be some pain. Here's the good news. Keely's fine. And here's the other good news. We're going to be fine. We're going to be fine if we just address it. If we don't stuff it under the mattress or stick it down in the garage where it's dark and dank, because it'll grow like mold if it's down there. But if we bring it out into the light and address it the way Jesus says to address it, I believe we have the makings of a great spiritual community. Amen? All right, let's pray.